Chapter 221. His eyes were wide open, and his lost gaze still retained the chaos in the dark environment, as well as a slight color of confusion and vigilance. This corpse, not Nobunaga, who else? In other words, the click sound just now came from Nobunaga's body. Nobunaga, in the previous dark environment, was actually cut off and killed. How come? Why is that? No matter how cold Marge's expression was in his daily life, he died by his side when he saw his member partner. The impact of this made her cold expression collapse in an instant. Looking at Nobunaga's head and body, there was irrepressible sadness and anger in his eyes, and his hands were clasped desperately. Let the tied-up little J blush because of the discomfort. This man with the knife actually died. At the same time as he was uncomfortable, Xiaoji also saw Nobunaga's dead corpse, and his pupils shrank slightly. Did Kula pick up do it? No, it is impossible. Look at the dead state of the corpse. It is obvious that the neck was cut off by some sharp object, and it is completely incompatible with the chains that Kula pickups have always used. Qi Li found the situation in the field and made an analysis in his mind for the first time. Liu Li and Melody are also impossible, let alone the immortal sect who have not even mastered the ability to read. So, who is it that has the premeditation and strength to kill this man with a knife surrounded by a brigade? Between the turns of the strange thinking, the illuminated area also attracted the attention of many people, and then... Kill! A high-pitched, shrill sound permeated the entire hotel lobby. Everyone ran madly toward the hotel gate, not wanting to stay in this dark and eerie environment for a moment. Why? Why was Nobunaga killed? Not caring about the commotion and restlessness of the surrounding crowd, both Pikonodal and Kyubi were also staring at the dead Nobunaga's corpse, their eyes full of disbelief. Whoosh! Could it be that the chainman also killed Nobunaga when he kidnapped the regimental commander? The shock is followed by endless sadness and the eyes and minds blinded by anger for a short time. No, I don't think so. Killing Nobunaga and kidnapping the regimental commander in such a short period of time is obviously not an impossible thing to do. At this time, Ron stepped forward and said solemnly. And judging from Nobunaga's corpse and death marks, the head was cut off, which is very inconsistent with the effect caused by the chain, and I personally tend to think that Kula Pickup found some companion and then acted at the same time. One kidnapped the regimental commander directly, one took the opportunity to kill Nobunaga, and then immediately escaped from here. With just 2 words, Ron stabilized the situation and calmed down Pikonodi and the others from their anger and sadness. After thinking about it carefully, he nodded his head with difficulty, and admitted that he was indeed right. Pike, you just probed the memories of Xiaoji and the 2 of them, is there any additional gain? Ron turned his head and spoke to Piknoda as he took down the throwing knife and the letter that had been fired at the beam. Between the words, there is a hidden control over the whole scene. However, concerned about Kuro's safety and mourning Nobunaga's death, the confused Paknada and the others did not care, but replied very seriously. No, I only read. Pikonodi shook her head, just about to say what she had read, but was suddenly stopped by Ron. Wait a minute, don't say it. Ron said, and spread out the letter in the slightly puzzled eyes of several people. Tell him the memories of both of them and kill him. The letters are written in several hunters' words, which are concise and concise. Apparently, this letter was addressed to Pikonada. After Pikonada took the letter from Ron, she immediately activated her ability to explore the remaining memory picture of the letter. In the dark environment, at the moment of the power outage, a service lady at the counter jumped out and threw the chain at their leader. Because Kurolo was thinking about the countermeasures of being in the dark, his reaction was slowed down by a few tenths of a second, which caught him off guard and was easily bound by the chains of the cool pickup. This is the entire content of the memory that can be seen in the letters, and no image of Nobunaga appears from beginning to end. After reading the memories in the letters, Pikonada was silent for a moment and walked over to Nobunaga's corpse. She reached out and lightly touched Nobunaga's body, and a memory came to mind again. As soon as the power went out, Nobunaga subconsciously put his hand on the knife handle. This was the action he had developed over the years with the combat alertness he had developed. There was nothing wrong with this one response in itself, but at this moment, it became his deadliest judgment. At the same moment when he put his hand on the handle of the knife, a shadowy figure came towards him with a very fast sprint. Without any anticipation, Nobunaga's eyes widened, and he couldn't see anything in the darkness. You can only use condensation to see the other party's 2 hands, in the shape of a tiger bite opening and closing, aiming at their own neck and falling fiercely. This attack seemed to be known that there would be a power outage, and it had been premeditated. The timing was very delicate, and the goal was clearly aimed at Nobunaga's neck. Under the observation of condensation, the thoughts gathered on the other party's hands are also quite not weak. Fast, accurate, fierce. These 3 words are a true portrayal of the person who attacked Nobunaga. Even Nobunaga gathered his thoughts on his neck at the first moment, but he still couldn't stop it. In the face of such a powerful thought, and with the powerful fist-killing move, the chi condensed by himself did not play the role of blocking it in the slightest. While being easily cut open by the other party, he also tore his own neck, so that he only felt a pain in his neck, and then he no longer had any consciousness. But he couldn't even say the last words. It has to be said that Nobunaga killed Skavara by cutting off his head, and he himself was killed by beheading. Inexplicably, some causal loops, retribution unpleasant meanings are in it. Nobunaga. Seeing how Nobunaga had been killed, Pikonoda couldn't help but squeeze her palms again. The letter in her hand was curled up by her, and it looked even more wrinkled. What she saw was a memory recorded from Nobunaga's point of view. As a result, she could only get a cursory glimpse of Nobunaga's murder, and she had no idea who was behind his murder. What is certain, however, is that from the memories read in the letters, the chain man attacked from the counter, targeting their leader. Chapter 222. The enemy that Nobunaga was facing was completely different from the counter. This meant that either the chainman had other accomplices, or that someone else had intervened in the dispute between their phantom brigade and the chain man. But Paiknorda subconsciously glanced at Chi Li and Xiaoji, who acted as quiet babies. Just now, she read only the words darkness and 7-point action from the 2 of them, and there was no other specific content. This shows that the chain man's capture of Kurilo and the unknown murderer's killing of Nobunaga were improvised. But since it is a temporary intention, can have such decisiveness, and have such a strong person, why has not been detected through memory? The man who killed Nobunaga was the first to rule out that he was a bodyguard colleague of the chained hand Kara pickup. From the previous bodyguard, Skawarla, I learned all the information about the members of the bodyguard group, and there was no impression of this person at all. As for these 2 little ghosts, the memories that were first caught and probed from them show that there is no human memory in this regard. In their minds, the strongest people they had ever come into contact with were the father of the enemy family himself, and the other was Ron. Ron. Pikonoda's gaze glanced at Ron and quickly shifted. Ron's hands? How is this possible? Not to mention that he has no motives for this at all, and his position is completely opposite to Nobunaga's. And in the first instant of the blackout, it was also the adaptation to the darkness that caught the silver-haired little ghost who beat the enemy family. Pikonoda immediately eliminated Ron's suspicions, as well as March and Kyubi. Instead of believing that it was their own members, it was better to wonder if the enemy family was secretly causing them bad. Nobunaga's wound. As Pikonoda was making up her brain, she heard March, crouched next to Nobunaga, suddenly speak. What's wrong? What's wrong with the wound? Well, when I tried to sew up Nobunaga's body, I made a little extra discovery. Marge nodded, and the cold glint in her eyes flickered. Nobunaga's wound condition is very close to the broken wound on the arm that I sewed for the regimental commander today. The regimental commander's broken arm. In other words, was it the same person who killed Nobunaga and cut off the regimental commander's arm? Kyubi, who has a very low sense of presence, said. Well, that's right. There was a flash of clarity in Pictorial's eyes. To have such a powerful strength to kill Nobunaga in an instant, in addition to the mysterious underworld family that injured the leader of the regiment before, there is really no second one to be found in this Yukiksen city. But wow, we've been focusing on the killer before, and we forgot that there is a more dangerous person lurking in the city, which is really careless. March's tone grew deeper, and she was a little remorseful. Is there someone else targeting the Phantom Brigade? Xiaoji and Chi Li, who did not understand the cause and effect at all, also understood a little after listening to the conversation between March and Picnoda and others. At the very least, they knew that the man who had killed the knife was not Kulapika, but another wave of people who did not deal with the brigade. But who is it? If this is the case, then the other party may still be hiding in some dark place, plus they still have to take care of Xiaoji, and my opinion is that it is best not to act rashly. If there is any situation, let's discuss it after Phaeton and Finks have arrived, and Pike. Until the situation is clearer, it is best to come as written in the letter. Ron's eyes flickered, and he said with a hammer. The three of them glanced at each other and all nodded in agreement. Well, besides, because the regimental commander asked the chivalrous to find the information of the mysterious man, I also called the chivalrous by the way, and he should also be on the way to come at full speed. When March finished, he put down the phone in his hand. Handing the thread to Kyubi on the side, she squatted down again and helped Nobunaga stitch up the body. Ron puts Kiki in the custody of Pickleta, who again reads the memory information that may have been missed. In this regard, Chi Li did not care anymore. The leader of the Phantom Brigade was captured by Kula pickups, and because of their identity and hostages, their lives would not be in danger for a short time. To some extent, this time the plan is also a success. The hall was empty and became extremely quiet because of the commotion caused by Nobunaga's death. Only the sound of silk thread stitching, in this hall, seems exceptionally clear. Leaning against the beam, Ron looked at the two little J's sitting on the ground without saying a word, while recalling the picture of the previous power outage. Because his eyes were slightly closed, even if the power went out, he could see a little bit. At 7 o'clock, when the hall was pitch black, Ron released the double-double for the first time. Most of the minds manipulated the avatars to attack Nobunaga, while the other side simply controlled the system to hold Kiki. Both are performed at the same time. I have to say that the ability of the double-double-double is really very suitable for sneak attacks and assassinations. Ron manipulated the doppelganger with the same strength as the main body and quickly launched an attack on Nobunaga. It is still that lethal tiger bite real fist. In this dark environment, the most effective can play a superior effect. Unexpectedly, he hit Nobunaga's neck with ease, and simply and neatly ended his life. After completing the killing and dissipating the doppelganger, the dominant consciousness returned to control the body of Chi Li again, and everything was so perfect. That's right, it was Nobunaga who killed Ron, who no one suspected. Having been in the brigade long enough, it's time to take advantage of it yourself. You can't blindly rely on cool pickup trucks, so it is not very interesting to come step by step. Such a dark environment just now is simply the perfect time, and it is better to act. Unfortunately, during that time, there was only enough to take one person, otherwise he would have considered killing March with him. As for why Nobunaga is Nobunaga, and no one else is chosen. Chapter 223. Pikonoda was the first to rule it out, and she would die because of the Kula pickup anyway, without him having to do anything more. Kyubi is the same, after half a year, he and the chivalrous guest will be killed by Siso in the toilet. Then the remaining two are Marge and Nobunaga. It's just that at that time, Kurolo happened to be standing next to Marge, with the chains cast by the Cool Law pickup, which was inconvenient to move. Coupled with the fact that Nobunaga is a solid martial arts faction, his mind is very strong, and his effect on improving his own strength is better, so Ron naturally made him the target of action. Glancing again at Nobunaga's corpse, which March had been intently sewing, Ron had a faint smile in his eyes. Meanwhile, on the streets of Yokiksen City, a speeding car weaves across the wide road. Thank you very much Xianpai, this time, without your help, our plan will probably not be completed. The driver of the car, Liu Li, thanked Xianpai in the passenger seat next to him. Nothing, you are friends of Xiaoji and Chi Li, that is also my friend, and it is right for friends to help each other. Xianpai waved his hand and smiled. Then he looked curiously in the rear-view mirror, sitting in the middle position tied up by chains, the silent Kurolo and the Melody sitting on his left and right sides, and the cool pickup truck dressed as a man and a woman. Who is this man, and why is he tied up with chains? Despite the curiosity in his heart, the immortal sect, who noticed that the atmosphere was slightly strange, wisely did not ask more. I really didn't expect that you would go out of your way to dress up as a man in order to catch me. Kurolo spoke of his surprise in a calm tone. After he said this, the atmosphere in the car immediately changed. Kula Pika immediately removed her disguise with red eyes and began an interaction with Kurolo. Under the moonlit night, the shaking car continued to move towards the Lingong airport in Yokiksen City, speeding towards it. Inside the Bechita Hotel. Here they come. By the time Kur beeped his warning, Ron was already looking at the gate. The automatic electric door opened and the three of them walked in together. At this moment when they arrived, the Bechita Hotel regained power. What's going on? The moment they walked into the hall, all three of them looked at Ron at the same time. The smell of blood in the air made their original gaze even more intense. Because of the sudden power outage, the regimental commander was captured by chained hands and killed by the secret man. Ron explained the situation simply. We all sent you the specific situation through our mobile phones, and you should all know it. To know is to know, but how can you accept it like this? Finks grumpily said. He gritted his teeth and continued to ask, what about Nobunaga's body? After being sewn and cured by March, I got it in my backpack. While the two were talking, Kyubi also handed over the previous letter. Why don't you chase it out? Fei Tan squinted his eyes and asked in a muffled voice. There are not enough people, Nobunaga has been killed, and we still have to take care of these two children with hostage value, and we are bound to divide some people. And I don't know if the powerful mysterious man is waiting outside, or if he continues to lurk in the hotel and rushes out, maybe one side will be ambushed. After all, the other side is a bit invincible to even the regimental commander, and will use a variety of mind abilities, but we don't even know the face and identity of the powerful guy. Ron analyzed it in a serious way, without bragging about his blushing and embarrassment. After Fei Tan listened, he glanced at Kubai and picked Norda, slightly silent. I took the letter handed by the chivalrous guest next to me and stopped dwelling on this issue. Unlike the original version, because they were worried about the safety of the regimental commander Kurolo, Nobunaga did not chase them out, which made Phaeton and Finks disagree. This time, the reason given by Ron is indeed that Finks and Phaeton can't fault it. At least on the surface, it is like this. Speaking of the mysterious man, I have collected a lot of strange information today. The chivalrous man put his hand on his chin and pondered. Before the regimental commander hired people to beat up the enemy family and successfully killed 10 old men, this news seems to have been known quickly. A gang called the RYRT family first seized the opportunity to take action, making the current gang community a mess for power and profit, and I also got some useful information from it. The 10 old men had formed an assassination regiment to deal with our brigade, and according to the description of the regimental commander and the information I had gathered, it was very likely that the mysterious man was a member of the assassination regiment. The list of assassination groups, I also took advantage of the civil unrest in their gang to get my hands on and do some investigation. Aside from those who were killed, and known members of the enemy-beating family, 3 were the most suspicious. The chivalrous man spoke, his tone getting more and more serious. Which 3? Finks, who had also read the letter, asked. One of them is the chained hand Kula pickup, and the other 2 happen to come from the rare underworld family that I said earlier, one is called Keetler and the other is called Pakashi. It can't be a chain hand. March took the lead in ruling out Kula pickups. Well, it's impossible. The warrior nodded and continued, as for the other 2 men, that Kettle I have checked his profile, is a lone ranger and a gunner. The information I got didn't show that he had some other powerful fighting skills, and all of his skills seemed to be related to his gun. Finks, then he can't be the mysterious person, but what about the other person? The chivalrous continued, as for another man named Pikashi, who comes from a world-renowned genre and is a martial artist. Martial artist? Phaeton captures the point. That's right, and his resume is simple, practicing within the genre and then going out to accept commissions. At this point, the chivalrous paused before continuing, but the number of commissions he has received is very small. A martial artist, with a simple resume, a small number of commissions received. I remember the regimental commander told us before that his opponent seemed to be a character similar to a combat maniac and a martial artist, right? Chapter 224. After 2 sentences, Finks suddenly raised the volume. Well, the regimental commander did say that. The chivalrous nodded, he knew what Finks' question meant. Hey, with so many clues pointing, I can't believe there's no relationship between that Pikashi and the mysterious man. Finks' fists touched, and the killing intent in his tone became more and more obvious. When the chain man thing is over and I have the right opportunity, I will go to the Rather family and ask them for advice. Count me in, Fei Tan said in a muffled voice, and then remained silent again. I have here a picture of that Pictacy, so that if you see it, you won't be unrecognizable. With that, the chivalrous beep pressed twice on the mobile phone and began to circulate it again. March looked at the profile photo on her phone and frowned. She vaguely sensed something was wrong, but it didn't seem like there was a problem. This sense of being both right and wrong, paradoxical, made her very confused. The Relt family, Payakasi. After listening to the analysis of the chivalrous and others, the corners of Ron's eyes twitched, and then he was extremely speechless. Well, finding the Relt family is also the correct target, but... He also thought that at most he would only find Kay Taylor's body, but he didn't expect to go around, but instead let the brigade's people target the bodyguard Uncle Pai Cassie, who had no sense of existence at all. Can the latter be said to be done at home, and the pot comes from heaven? Is it a flying disaster? Would you like to be a friendly reminder? Well, then while paying attention to this suspected mysterious Pai Cassie, we must also discuss the abduction of the regimental commander. After the mobile phone was finished circulating and returned to his hand again, the chivalrous guest put away his hands and pinched his waist. Billy, 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 Billy. And just after he finished speaking, a phone rang. It was the regimental commander's cell phone. Finks took the phone out of his pocket and looked at the caller ID on it. He lifted his head, and after turning around the silent members' faces, pressed the switch button. Mosey Mosey. On the other end of the phone, there were still vehicles heading for the airport. I'll give you 3 instructions now. Kula Pika took the hand that had come out of Kurolo's body and spoke. He didn't know who was answering the phone opposite, he just found the first number on the Kurolo's mobile phone interface dialed out. Well, when he caught Jay and Chi Li earlier, Kurolo called Finks and asked him and Fei Tan to come too. So, it caused a conversation between Kula Pika and Finks. The greatest principle, you must absolutely obey my orders, and if you do not follow them I will kill your regimental commander immediately. Kula Pika said, and then set 3 instructions: don't track our whereabouts, don't hurt the 2 hostages, and let Pikonoti answer the phone. The corner of Finks's mouth on the other end of the phone twitched. Unwilling to be led by the nose all the time, he lied that he had beaten the 2 little devils half to death, and then was ruthlessly hung up by the cool pickup. After some chicken flying dog jumping, it was still Pikonota who took the mobile phone and came to a no-man's place to answer alone. After receiving the call, leaving the message that everyone else is back to the base, only Pikonota is going to meet, she leaves the Becky's hotel with a determined face. This is when a series of things happened at the Bekida hotel. Spider's base, inside the abandoned building. I didn't expect Nobunaga to die, it seems that this game is much more interesting than mine. Kurolo was taken away by Kula Pika and can only duel him if they meet, but if he leaves here, he will be killed by Kura Pika again, and I need a little help. Siso took out his mobile phone, pressed beep a few times, and then sent a message, and the end of the text was also suffixed with a heart number mark. Ding! 2 seconds later, he received a reply. I can help you, who made me have a deeper friendship with you than the brigade, but you still have to pay. Okay. At the Becky's hotel, Finks, Chick, and Fei Tan watched as Pikano walked out of the gate without looking back. 5 seconds later, the 3 of them made a move at the same time and took a step. Wait, what do you want to do? March raised an eyebrow and asked with a raised voice. The Shenner's instructions and conditions are for us all to go back to the base and let Pike go alone. Yeah, that's what he said. Finks turned his face and tilted his head. We're not allowed to track them yet. But so what? Finks said with a look of indifference. But if we disobey the order, the regimental commander will be killed. If the regimental commander is killed, then we will kill the chain man again. I believe the regimental commander thinks the same way, and he will say the same thing, and the first thing in the first place is the brigade. Finks and Fei Tan expressed their views one by one, and the chivalrous guest next to them also nodded. I feel the same way, there's no point in letting Pike go alone. Seeing that the 3 of them all had the same attitude, Marge couldn't help but tighten the thought line in his hand slightly. I agree with Marge, let's go back to the base for the time being. Kuo, who had been silent, came out and brushed his presence and stood on the side of Marge. For a time, the atmosphere in the hotel lobby was somewhat subtle. Regarding whether to follow Yuparnon, 2 factions were formed. Hey, there's really no way to communicate with you guys, Finks' eyelids furrowed, and then he suddenly turned his head and looked at Ron, who hadn't yet expressed his opinion. Hey, Ron, what do you think? I want to hear your opinion. My opinion. Sensing that the chivalrous March had their eyes on him, Ron thought for a moment and said. All I know is to obey the rules of the brigade. The survival of the brigade is more important than the life of the regimental commander. If the leader dies, another figure will inherit the position of the leader. Chapter 225. To negate the rules is to negate the whole brigade, and I am on the side of the brigade. Ha! I knew that there was still someone who understood. When Ron finished speaking, a smile appeared on Finks' face, and Kyubi and March were even more silent. However, the eyes of the 2 were more determined. The bound little J was the most experienced, he felt that the thought line on his body almost strangled him for a moment. So, are you in favor of us tracking down Piknol Ta, No, I don't agree. The smile on Fink's face stiffened, followed by a strange expression of "You trademark are teasing me." The chivalrous man twitched the corner of his eye, and Fei Tan simply turned his face to the side. March and QB also looked at Ron again, still not speaking, but there was more color and light in their eyes. Why? Didn't you say you were on the side of the rules? Finks felt some toothache and looked wordlessly at Ron. Yes, but it is not yet the time of life and death for the brigade, of course, the life of the regimental commander is the first. Ron responded with course. But if you follow the instructions issued by the chain hand and lead the nose, maybe half of the members will die according to the prophecy poem, and after Wojin, Nobunaga will also die. Fink's tone intensified, and then he was scolded back by Ron. So what? Ron said without retreating, according to the content of the prophecy poem, in the worst case, only half of the members died, and at that time the brigade was still there, although it was a little broken, but it was far from the moment of life and death. And what is recorded in the prophecy is only what may have happened, and it is completely preventable. Let's just do what Kurapika said, because if a few of us get together, he won't be able to help us. Let's see if we can save the regimental commander. The worst case scenario at present is nothing more than the death of the abducted regimental commander and the Picnota who went to negotiate, which is much better than the casualties mentioned in the prophecy poem. In addition, don't forget that there is also that powerful mysterious person hidden in the shadows, and the best way for us to deal with it at present is to gather together and not give any enemies a chance to take advantage of it. A series of words came out. And the expression on Ron's face was very serious. I agree with Ron. March and QB both spoke at the same time. You guys! The green tendons on Fink's forehead jumped violently, and even some of the protruding blood vessels could be faintly seen. Billy 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 Billy! Just as Finks was trying to curse, the phone rang again. It was Kurapika who called, confirmed that no one here violated the instructions, and made a warning that we have the ability to know the situation on your side, don't act rashly, and then hung up the phone again. It seems that now I can't follow the past, I can go back to the base first. The chivalrous stalled his hands, a look of helplessness. If the situation on his side is really known to the other party, then he can only return to the base first. If you rush out to track down the other party and are detected, then not only will you not be able to find the location of the other party, but even the regiment leader will be directly killed. Or go back first, wait until Pictorial has negotiated with that side, and learned the conditions of the other party and the specific location of the other side, and then make plans. Whoosh! Fei Tan was silent, and Finks knew that he could only do this first. After scolding reluctantly, he and Marge rushed back to the base with Xiaoji and Qi Li. At the same time, inside the abandoned base building. Little children. Franklin and Peeling Lev, who sensed that someone had sneaked in and came out to investigate the situation, saw the beautiful girl who jumped out of the window and glanced at it, and she couldn't help but wince slightly. Was it with that Shenner? Or someone else who strayed in? Looking at the girl's athletic hands, in the blink of an eye, it disappeared into the speed of the corner, and the two pondered slightly. Pedal to pedal. In the shadow of the corridor, Sisso walked out with a playing card in his hand and a light step. Nothing unusual, right? Franklin asked. Not at all. Sisso replied, turned, and walked back. Franklin and Peeling Lev glanced at each other, and after noticing anything else, they returned the same way. However, they did not notice that the pace of Sisso was slightly different from the original, it was no longer a cat step, and the way he held the playing cards in his hand was also reversed. It is some distance away from the abandoned building. Well, my brother has successfully replaced you, what is the tail payment? Beautiful girl Kurt dressed in a kimono, his eyes and tone were very plain, and he asked the real Sisso next to him. I have already played in the past, and with my friendship with Ilmi for so many years, of course, I will not default on the payment. Sisso played the playing cards in his hand and narrowed his eyes slightly. Then he turned and left. I'll take a step first, if there's anything going on here at the base, you can always send me a message. Without turning around, he waved his hand, and within a few breaths, Sisso's figure disappeared into the night. Kurt stared at the back of Sisso's departure for a moment, then at the abandoned building again, thoughtfully for a moment. The moon is exceptionally bright, whether it rises to the highest sky or slowly falls, its bright moonlight is still evenly sprinkled on this earth. They're back. Inside the building, when the moonlight fell into the building, Franklin looked up and looked toward the door. At the same moment, the figures of Mark Iron and the others appeared there. The cold March, the expressionless chivalrous, the obscure Finks, the indifferent Ron, and the Kyubi and Phaeton, who are about the same height behind. As well as Xiaoji and Qi Li, who were tied up by the 5 flowers and brought back to the base again. Was it the guy who asked me for contact information in the trap tower when the hunter tested it? It turns out that he is also a member of the Phantom Brigade. The killer's intuition made the eyes of the IL fan disguised as Siso fall on Ron for the first time, and then... Chapter 226. Ilmi took the hand of the playing card for a moment, and his eyes became sharp for a moment, but then dissipated in the blink of an eye. Well, I was fortunate to have promised Siso to help, otherwise I really didn't know that Xiao Qi had been caught by the people of the Phantom Brigade. This is good, with me here to take care of, if anyone dares to hurt Xiao Qi hair, I will definitely not spare him. His face was expressionless, plain as water, but his heart quickly began to roll. Brother control brother strong online calf protection. As Ilmi's eyes gradually changed, Margie and they arrived at the base without saying a word. Finks was even more black-faced and held his chest with both hands, standing with Fei Tan, forming the most cute height difference. What the hell is going on? Why did Nobunaga die? Franklin, who has a big brother, said quietly. Although he had learned the specific situation and news before, he still couldn't help but ask again. This is his corpse, you will understand it when you see it. Ron stepped forward, his arm flicked, and Nobunaga's body, which had been sewn up by March, appeared in front of everyone. Crotch pants, long knives, hair. The man was still the Ronin dressed as a samurai, but the empty eyes and the neck full of sewing features all indicated that there was only one shell left. The grumpy Nobunaga they were familiar with was no longer there. Nobunaga, the mysterious man. Looking at Nobunaga's corpse, Franklin's eyes flickered, and his large rough hands grasped the hem of his pants slightly. Instantaneous second kill, obviously fist and claw kung fu, but played a sharp blade weapon that is completely inferior to the full of thoughts. Phaeton, who saw Nobunaga's corpse dead for the first time, gave his evaluation. At the same time, he squinted and touched his umbrella sword. As an interrogator of murder, he was all too familiar with such methods of killing. Sometimes he also uses a hand knife to solve the opponent simply and neatly. Didn't even Nobunaga react in time. It seems that the opponent's speed is not slow. Fink's gaze fell on Nobunaga's hand, which had not let go, clutching the handle of the knife. Instead of loosening and falling because of the loss of strength due to death, the hand and the knife were firmly glued together because of the firm thought before death. Because the death was so sudden, didn't the resentment arise much? Ilmi also glanced at the corpse, and he gave a professional evaluation of his profession. Let's bury Nobunaga first. Franklin looked again at Nobunaga's dead eyes, took a deep breath, and said in a slightly heavy tone. There was not much to say, a few power-type fighting factions, 3 or 2 times made a simple deep pit, buried the letter Chang'an. March also found a few pieces of wood, cut them into a 10 shape, and inserted them on Nobunaga's grave. After everything was buried, Ron's eyes flashed a light, quietly activating his mind power. As in the Hunters' Mausoleum of the Hunters Association, restraints and vows were made on the condition that the body could be touched through the grave at a certain distance on the condition that 5 times the resentment be dissipated. In this way, even after Nobunaga was buried, Ron could still touch things from Nobunaga's body without attracting the attention of the members of the brigade. After all, they wouldn't dig up Nobunaga's body again to see his face. When several members of the brigade in the abandoned building buried Nobunaga, Pictorial also came to the Ring Palace airport step by step according to the instructions of the Kula pickup truck, and boarded the 3rd airship. On the airship, she finally meets Kurapika, and the melody of the judging situation follows him, and Kuralo, who is tied up by the flowers. Looking at Kuralo's face and body with more or less scars and blood, Pikonoda did not say anything on the surface, but his heart still twitched twice. Later, after planting the trial chain for Kuralo, no more use of any mind and mind abilities and no further contact with the brigade as original, Kula Pika also gave her an agreement to exchange 2 hostages before midnight and not to leak their information under any circumstances. As a result, the preliminary exchange and cooperation between the 2 sides was reached. At 12 o'clock, the hostages of both sides will be exchanged. After everything was agreed, Parker Norda planned to leave the airship. But before leaving, she greeted Kuralo's emotionless gaze and Kula Pika's glowing eyes and asked her the only question. Did you, when you kidnapped our regimental commander at the Becky Hotel, kill one of our regiment members? Killed your members. Kula Pika winced at the words, then immediately denied, no. Kurolo next to him was moved in his heart, his brow subconsciously wrinkled, and an ominous premonition surged in his heart. Only that little bit of time, to capture your regimental commander, I feel that it is not enough. How can I have the extra time to kill your companions? Do you have any other companions in Becky's hotel besides the accomplice who reads the newspaper and the radio? Counting Melody and my words, there are only 3 of us on our side at the Bekida hotel. Why are you asking this question? Because one of our members was killed at the same time as the power outage. Pikonoda said in a slightly heavy tone. Her words made Kula Pika stunned, and also made Kurolo's heart suddenly ache. Did another member die after Wojin? Is it March, Kuki, Nobunaga or Ron? Why, the chainman should be right, he caught me and immediately left the Becky hotel, not him, who would have? Kurolo's heart could not be calmed, and the exhalation was slightly accelerated, but it calmed down in an instant. Piknaka looked at Kurapika's unformed expression of surprise and once again determined that the person who killed Nobunaga was not him. Just before boarding the airship, she receives a message from the chivalrous guest about some inferences about Nobunaga's killer, and then asks her to make a final confirmation with the chainman. Seeing the expressions made by the cool pickup truck and the Melody next to him, Park Norda was finally sure. Nobunaga's death really had nothing to do with the chain hand. Chapter 227. I don't know who is also targeting you spiders, but the only member of you I killed was the big guy numbered 11. After a slight silence, Kula Pika gave her own answer. Pikonada nodded slightly, then turned and walked toward the outside of the airship. As he took a step, he continued. The man who died at the Becky's hotel was Nobunaga, who was in league with Wakan at number 11, a samurai with a sword, and you should know his information as well. The cause of his death was the neck of someone with super martial arts in an instant, and we suspect that he was a member of your underworld family assassination group. Pikonada's words are explained to Kula Pika, but in fact they convey some kind of message to Kurolo in disguise. Cut off your neck? Assassination regiment. So to speak. How clever Kurolo was, after hearing Piknoda's words, his mind spread instantly, and he quickly locked on to a certain figure. Is that the person? The killer who was able to use multiple mind abilities in the auction building and cut off my arm. For a moment, Kurolo thought of yesterday's battle on the roof, the guy with the human skin mask. The sewn right hand clenched into a fist, causing his mood to rise and fall again. After all the words that should be said were said, and the questions that were wanted to be asked and confirmed were also asked, Pikonodi did not stay any longer. After disembarking the airship, hurried towards the base as fast as possible. Pike. On the airship, Kurolo did not look through the window at the figure of Pickleta leaving in the night. He was inexplicably sad. Wakan is dead, Nobunaga is dead, and Pikonodi is going to make a deal with the chainman again, and maybe more companions will die. He did not expect that Piknolda would really come alone, because he had taken everything into account because of absolute reason, but he did not count the feelings of the members of the group, especially Piknoda. His presence in the brigade was too strong, and many members did not want to see him die as a regimental commander, and would approve of the deal. But I am afraid that there will be many members who obey the rules of the brigade and whose intellect is greater than their emotions do not accept this condition. Two very different views are opposed. Will there be infighting, right? Perhaps, half of the members of the prophetic poem will die, not by chained hands, but as a result of our infighting? The airship fell silent again, and only Kulalaman's uncertain eyes flickered. The distance from Ring Palace Airport to base is not close, but it is not far. At full speed, within half an hour, Pikonata was back in the abandoned building. In front of all the 9 members of the group, he said that he would take Xiaoji and Chi Li away and exchange them for Kurolo's conditional transaction. Naturally, this way many people do not agree. Tell me the location, Pikonodini, I'm going to chain the hand directly. The first to bear the brunt is to hold back one. Boss unhappy thinks. Without heeding Fink's words, Pikonada's eyes circled back and forth between each member, then closed his eyes. Then, as if by some sort of decision, Pikonodi let out a soft breath, and then her eyes opened sharply. I would never say the location, and I wanted to take the 2 children to the designated place alone, hoping that you would not get in the way. The tone is full of determination and determination. Crunchy, creaky, think I'm in the way. The sound of gritted teeth came, and Fink's eyebrowless eyelids shrugged, and a trace of black lines appeared in his eyes. You figure out, who's in the way. Yes. At the last sound, he roared straight out. At the same time, the hands holding the chest naturally fell, and Peaconata's body retreated slightly, and also pulled away a posture. In an instant, the atmosphere of gunpowder in the stadium is full of atmosphere. Go ahead, Pike, we'll help you block it here. When March stood between the two and took a stand with his back to Pickleta, it undoubtedly acted as a further fuse for detonation. You say? Blocking what? Don't look down on people. Fei Tan said in a muffled voice. This extremely unpleasant word made the cold glow in his eyes flash away. As he spoke, QB also stood silently next to March. Are you guys playing really? I really don't understand, is there something wrong with your head? Finks looked at the extremely serious-looking March, angry and at the same time said that he could not understand. Maybe, before we arrived, everyone was controlled by Chain Man, and a few of them were brainwashed. Fei Tan's eyes moved, thinking of some possibility, and looked at March and the others more and more unkindly. It has nothing to do with him. March's face also became more and more severe. It's just a waste of time to go on like this, so I'll force her to tell the truth. Click. As soon as Fei Tan's voice fell, there was a sound of joints shaking. Fight, touch up. When the atmosphere is getting more and more depressing, it seems that it will be ready to move at any time. Whoever does it first, I'll help the other side kill him. A man who does not follow the rules of the brigade, I do not agree that he is a member of the brigade. A calm voice sounded in everyone's ears. Ron. The chivalrous guest, who already had some headaches, saw that Ron was also down, slightly embarrassed, and then followed suit. That's right, now everyone is a member of the brigade, and the brigade rules do not allow real face turning, and I am the same, if anyone does it first, they will help the other side. Oh? But what if they, including Ron, were already controlled by the Shenner? In this case, they are no longer members of the brigade. Fei Tan did not give in, without the slightest intention of giving up. Not to be outdone, Marge said, no matter what you think, we are not controlled by anyone. Then who knows, in case you... Are you an idiot? Ron interrupted Fei Tan's words directly. What do you say? Did I say you were an idiot? Facing Fei Tan's increasingly gloomy face, Ron did not give the other party the slightest face, and ruthlessly turned on the mockery mode. After Kula Pika bundled up the regimental commander, where did he get more thoughts and time to brainwash so many of us? Chapter 228. And don't forget that there was a powerful mysterious person nearby at that time. If he saw that Kula Pika was going to brainwash us, how could he kill Nobunaga? Also, if you take 10,000 steps back. Ron said, the sarcasm in his eyes getting thicker, if we had been brainwashed before you came, we would have left the three of you there long ago at the Becky's Hotel. These two little devils with good strength, plus March, Pike, Ku-Beep, and the four of us, can definitely leave you all behind in the case of a sneak attack, and even if it is not a sneak attack, under the light and righteousness, you will not have any chance. Ron's voice echoed throughout the building. Peeling Lev, Franklin, and the parties involved in the operation, the three paused for a moment and then thought about it, nodding slightly. Admittedly, if March had really been brainwashed by chained hands, then at the Becky's Hotel, they would have sneaked up on them, and at that time they would have killed each other and rescued the two little ghosts. Of course, the reason is such a reason, and the sense of reason is more chivalrous can be understood, but it does not mean that others can accept what do you say. Fei Tan's eyes narrowed completely, and the murderous spirit inside was overflowing. The hand in his pocket also reached out, one hand in the shape of a hook, and the other hand directly grasped the umbrella sword behind him. Are you saying that if you fight head-on, you can win me over? The murderous intent in the tone is not concealed in the slightest. Ron's words made him feel very unhappy. Isn't it? You know that you haven't fought before, have you forgotten what the result of the previous battle was? Ron shrugged back directly, and without giving Fei Tan a chance to speak, continued in silence with the other two spectators of the battle, Finks and Chivalrous. It's crushing. You are not my opponent at all. To put it bluntly, if it is really a life and death struggle, you are in my hands, and you can't walk out of 10 moves. 10 tricks. Fei Tan was completely fried at this time, and with a snort, he pulled out the umbrella sword, and the blade was aimed directly at Ron. You probably look up to yourself too much, do you want to try it again now? At the same time as he spoke, the chi on Fei Tan's body instantly soared, and the umbrella sword he was holding in his hand suddenly condensed with amazing thoughts. Is this really moving? Franklin and Peel Left both stared at each other, and Ilfin, who was watching the play, also shrank slightly. Before Fei Tan said that he wanted to take down Marge on the grounds that they had been brainwashed, at that time he still had the intention of interrogation, without killing. And this time, Fei Tan was completely planning to fight with real swords and true grace, which was a bit super outlined. Franklin was just about to intervene to stop it, but heard Ron say again. It seems that during this time you have also done a lot of asceticism, and your strength has improved a lot. Ron observed the power of the mind on Fei Tan's body and commented. Fei Tan squinted his eyes and did not speak. All this time, he had suffered a lot in order to be able to beat him when he fought Ron again. The crushing defeat of the last battle made him unforgettable, coupled with the training of holding back the time, the competitive spirit to fight again and win back. All kinds of reasons were stacked together, so that at this moment, he completely exploded. Or rather, he would have asked Ron for another fight, which was an inevitable trend, but it was just at this moment. Under the dangerous flying, accompanied by a slightly foolish look, Ron actually laughed. However, this level of thought is not enough to compete with me again, you know. As Ron spoke, his tone gradually became a little heavier. You're not the only one who has improved your strength during this time because of your asceticism. Boom. After Ron finished speaking, an even greater wave of chi and mind power swept through the whole field in an instant. What is this? March, Finks and others, who are closest to Ron, are the most intuitive feelers. Under such fluctuations in chi volume and mental strength, their pupils shrank suddenly. So strong. Ron, he's stronger than he was when he was in Terran Ansabel. The chivalrous look became solemn, and he had the same thoughts as Finks. It's only been a few months, his strength has improved a lot again, and to be honest, Fei Tan's progress has surprised me enough. I didn't expect Ron to be stronger than him. I'm afraid Ron has also trained even more rigorously than Phaeton. As a good partner of Phaeton, Finks has seen Phaeton's special training in these months. At that time, he felt that Fei Tan was already inhuman enough, and he didn't expect that Ron's increase was stronger than Fei Tan's, so didn't he mean that his training was even more fierce than Fei Tan? This is also a cruel person, ah. When Finks was shocked and sighed, Ron's side of March was the most unstable inside. When we first met in the Sky Arena 2 years ago, his strength was still so weak, and only 2 years later, he had such strength. What did he experience? As the first meeting with Ron at the Sky Arena 2 years ago, and later watching his Full House game, and the martial arts conference of March, is most shocked by Ron's progress. However, seeing that Ron was vaguely on their side made Marge's heart gradually settle down. Such a strength and mental strength, I'm afraid it is not weaker than the regimental commander, father, right? Franklin, Peeling Left and Ilmi all thought at the same time. The first time they took out the strongest person in their memory and compared it with Ron. The result was that they all stared sideways at Ron. Is this what Ron really is? Qi Li and Xiao Ji, who were tied up by the symbol of the chain, were just getting started with the ability of the rookie, and they were most oppressed by Ron's power. Such a wave of power gave them goosebumps, and the look in Ron's eyes was full of shock. Especially Qi Li, thanks to Ron's power is not aimed at him, otherwise under the action of the silver needle on his head, he would have broken the chain and hid aside. Chapter 229. Even if he was not oppressed, he did not feel very well. Is the champion of the Olympia martial arts tournament such strength? Terrible thoughts, and amazing strength. The other members of the brigade, including this short member of the Skull Cloak, will not be Ron's opponents. Qi Li gave his own judgment in an instant. Fei Tan, whom he called a member of the short group, was the one who faced Ron's oppression and could feel his strength the most. At the first moment of feeling this wave of thought, Fei Tan knew that he had lost again. If he fought again, he would never win. Whether it is the strength of the mind or the amount of qi, he is not an opponent. This made him feel very unwilling at the same time, but also produced a deep sense of powerlessness. Is this man invincible? Sensing the reluctance in Fei Tan's eyes, Ron's eyes flashed a light. What he is showing at present is not his true level, strictly speaking, only the 70 or 80% of his own mental strength and qi. After all, showing wrists and strength must be there, hiding is also necessary. Who has not yet pointed the bottom card? You know, Ron's strength has improved a lot after the battle between the Tarund Kingdom and Phaeton. The ability and mind of Huashi Dolang, the ability and mind of the Face Shadow, and the mind chi of most of the yin beasts, as well as the increase brought about by the mind ability of the upgrade game. Coupled with the provision of the late Wojin and some gangster killers, Ron's strength can be said to have grown by leaps and bounds. However, it was completely inferior to the ascetic results of Fei Tan's time, and even exceeded a lot. Thus, there was the power and strength that shocked all the members of the brigade. Fei Tan stared at Ron at the same time, holding his umbrella sword deadly, making his fingers slightly white. No. I also have the ability to read, and I have the burning sun. As long as I use my mind power, I will definitely win, he will never be able to stop it, absolutely. Fei Tan's somewhat dim eyes shone brightly again. His mindfulness, burned by the scorching sun, is to create a small sun with considerable power and scope, and at the same time uses the mind-powering ability the unforgivable one to manifest a garment that protects himself from being affected. When the sun bursts, the burning temperature will burn all the creatures around it to death. This one mind ability is only activated when Fei Tan loses his mind due to anger and so on, and starts to speak his hometown dialect, and the power of the move refers to the degree of damage he has suffered. Fei Tan he has the confidence if using this trick. Definitely might have won over Ron, only now. That's it. Have you had enough trouble? Franklin, the big brother in the brigade, began to speak. The priority now is to save, everything else will be said later, and besides, Ron March, they have not been brainwashed, there is no doubt about this, right? Chivalrous and Finks shook their heads. Joke, Ron has such a strong strength, the chain hand brainwashed him? How is this possible? And even if they are brainwashed, as Ron said, with such strength, if they sneak in the moment the chivalrous guests enter the hotel, they will definitely be caught off guard, and even if they do not die, they will be seriously injured. Thus, March's brainwashed remarks, in the face of Ron's mighty power, became impossible speeches. Fei Tan, put away your weapons, now is not the time for infighting. Ron, you have also dissipated your breath, and you yourself have said that there is no real face turning in the brigade. The good old man's big brother Franklin once again persuaded, which further eased the atmosphere in the venue. Wow! Knowing that he was definitely not Ron's opponent if he didn't use his mind ability to fight, but firmly believing that his mind ability could kill Ron's flying tan, after a cold snort, he put away his umbrella sword without any psychological pressure. Seeing Fei Tan put away his weapon, Franklin's eyes also looked over, and Ron was also moved, scattering the amount of chi that was wrapped around him. A big battle disappeared into invisibility, making the atmosphere in the venue much easier again. Then it's time to discuss the rescue of the president. Ron, what do you think? Franklin said, his eyes on Ron again. In terms of Ron's current strength, no matter which side he joins, it basically means acting according to which side's point of view. It was Ron who used his strength to win him the right to speak within the brigade. Others, including Fei Tan, also set their sights on Ron again. Franklin's words and the gaze of others lifted the spirits of March and Pickleta. Ron, who had a vaguely revealed position, was on the side of March and the hostage-takers to rescue the president's lord and faction. Not only did March think so, but so did Finks and chivalrous people. However, the brigade is not arbitrary because it is strong. You are strong, at best, it only brings a reasonable environment for discussion, and if you want to be the lord and peace, you must at least come up with a convincing reason. Facing the light or dark, curious or bland gazes of the members of the brigade, Ron nodded slightly and said, I'm in favor of Pike taking them with them and going to exchange regimental leaders. As soon as Ron's voice fell, the eyes of Marges and the others lit up, and Finks twitched his face and looked at Franklin. Why? Franklin muffled. Because this is the most stop-loss and the least risk probability method at present. Ron said. What we have in front of us now is nothing more than two choices. According to Kula Pika's instructions, let Pick Norda go to exchange hostages, and as Finks said, let Pike tell us the location, and we will go directly to Kula Pika to save the leader. Just consider the vested consequences and possibilities of both options, and the choice is obvious. When Franklin heard this, he couldn't help but nod his head slightly, and he also preferred this approach of choosing from the result. My personal opinion is that when the brigade is not facing life and death, the regimental commander should be the first priority. Chapter 230. Otherwise, the spider's head is a decoration, so which side can save the regimental leader at the least cost, which side I will stand on. If Pick Nor fails on this side, the regimental commander is killed, and Pike is killed. If Finks failed, the regimental commander was killed, and the only difference between the two sides was Pike's life, which did not threaten the survival of the brigade. Correspondingly, Parker's side is more secure, the success rate is higher, and the success rate of Fink's side is too low. So, I would like to suggest that pick Nita go to the trade first. If Kula Pickup really defaults and kills the leader and pick Nota, it is not too late for us to take revenge at that time. Anyway, we all know their information, and we can't run. In that case, Marges, and they don't have much to say, Finks, you can also go to Karapika and kill the ring, satisfying everyone's opinion, and at the same time, the brigade has not yet disbanded the crisis, isn't that enough? When Ron finished speaking, he stopped speaking and let the field fall silent again. Finks looked up at Ron, his mouth shrugged, and he didn't say anything after all. Wow! After taking a sip of spit, his unwilling fists collided, and Finks once again held his chest in both hands and retreated to the side. Apparently having acquiesced in favor of Ron's claims. Then do as Ron says, let Pike take these two little devils to negotiate with the chain man, and our next action will depend on the outcome of this negotiation. If the other party does not fulfill the transaction, or if there is any other follow-up threat. Franklin said, the corners of his mouth revealing a sinister arc, murderous. I'll let him know that there's a limit to our patience. This sentence undoubtedly sets the final tone for this controversy. The only people who really hold the opposition to the trading action are Finks, Phaeton and half a chivalrous. Finks did not object, and after the confrontation between Fei Tan and Ron, he also remained silent. So, it's even less controversial. After Kula Pika called again, Finks looked childish, like squeezing toothpaste, and after the words "we agree to the deal" came out of his mouth, he sat down and sulked. After that, the members of the brigade watched as Pakonota walked out of the building with Jay and Chi Li. The base was once again quiet. Thank you very much. After some time, after Ron had also found a clean stone to sit down, he heard a soft voice next to him. Looking up, Ron saw Marge standing beside him with a flat look in his eyes. Behind her was a QB who couldn't see her face. It's just that her face eased up. Then there is the expression and aura of a high cold living person who is not allowed to enter. Thank you. It's not necessary, they are all members of a brigade, what to say? Ron smiled and shook his head, and then at the door, his eyes gradually deepened. I'm just basing myself on the basic position of the regimental commander that nothing happened to the regiment, but if this time the transaction fails, if the regimental commander dies. So what do you want to do? Marge asked in an unchanged tone. Then the position of the next leader of the Phantom Brigade will be entrusted to me. Ron laughed suddenly, glaring at Maki with a mouth full of dazzling white teeth. Marge. Ignoring Marge's strange expression, and the strange eyes of the others around him who heard the movement and shot at him, Ron said to himself. In this world, the weak eat the strong, the fist is the last word, the next regimental commander election within the brigade, if you do not choose according to strength, I am absolutely not convinced. Marge's ass moved to the side, a little farther away from Ron. This guy sometimes looks very reliable, sometimes his thinking is too far away. In terms of strength, if you really fight, it may not be that you win. As the number 2 person in the brigade, Fei Tan listened to Ron's words, but he was once again for tat. I'll know when I try it. Ron's eyelids didn't jump. Or do you want to divide the winners and losers now? Okay, you two have made a fuss, and the regimental commander is not dead yet. Seeing that the two had a tendency to quarrel again, Franklin couldn't help but cover his head and dissuade him with a headache. Then he saw the slightly eerie gaze thrown by Left beside him. I'm not cursing the regimental commander, and I don't mean anything else. It's just that the transaction is not over yet, and I will talk about other things after the results come out. Nodding, Peel Left withdrew his gaze and lay down again enchantedly. Finks on the side had no idea about this topic at all, and still sat there and continued to read in fragments. If the regimental commander can't come back, I'll kill all of you guys, kill them all. On his side, Sisso continues to play the playing cards in his hand, but a red peach jay silently slipped from his hand, causing him to tilt his head. When he was about to pick it up, he heard a faint voice next to him. Sisso, when did your card skills become unfamiliar? You never dropped your cards on the ground before. The figure of Sisso suddenly froze, and then quickly raised his head as if nothing had happened, just in front of Ron's smiling eyes. Sensing that there was also a slight line of sight around him, Sisso replied quietly. No, it was just a small mistake. When I used to build pyramids, I also had a lot of cards that fell. But now you're shuffling, and... Ron looked at his intention to bend down to pick up the cards, and said in an inexplicable tone. Generally speaking, if a single card falls to the ground, don't you pick it up with stretching and contracting love. Xisuo immediately stopped moving, and his head was slightly lowered, making it impossible to see his face clearly. What's wrong? It's not like your usual style, Siso. Ron said, and the others gradually sensed that something was wrong. Even Finks stopped thinking and turned his face to look at Siso, who was sitting there. Fei Tan narrowed his eyes slightly, and the peeling left next to Siso moved his body and took a defensive posture. Chapter 231. Well, not too soon, and in less than an hour, he will be back to his original appearance. Siso, oh no, it was Ilfam who rubbed his own face that was beginning to deform somewhat. The face of Xisuo on top of him instantly appeared several large bags and returned to their original state again, with a faint tendency to collapse. As he was now, even if Ron didn't point out his identity, he would be found out that something was wrong because of the strange appearance of his face, and it was only a matter of time before. The members of the brigade were not fools, and after Ron had pointed out the suspicious point and the face of Siso was like this, how could they not realize that something had happened beyond their control? You guy, what the hell is going on? Franklin immediately shed his fingers and pointed the mouth of the black hole at the Siso who was sitting there calmly. You shouldn't be Siso, right? Franklin's low, wary voice sounded. As he spoke, Flapping Left quickly got up and was ready to strip and dance. At the same moment, Fei Tan's hand grasped the sword handle again, and Finks also stood up. Who is this guy of yours? Dare to come to our Phantom Brigade to pretend to be a ghost, the courage is not small. Finks said and shook his arm, his eyes sinister. He also held his breath, and now he wanted to find a suitable target to vent. Can't hide it. Ilmi still tilted his head and looked around at the surrounding brigade members, and then slowly stood up. And visible to the naked eye, the appearance of his face was like condensed clay, confused. In the eyes of either vigilance or hostility, the facial features were rearranged, and a very delicate young man with vertical eyes and long hair appeared in front of everyone. Its facial appearance, in the eyes of some people, is one of the three beauties of the hunter world alongside Siso and Kurolo. Is it really Ilfin? Ron was clear in his heart, but there was a look of surprise on his face just right. Jitaleku? Or, Ilmi beat the enemy? Punch the enemy. So, he's beating up the enemy family. This title of Ron caused a riot in the base. Alarming voices began to sound, and it was obvious that the spiders were very surprised by this man of Siso. Ron, you said he beat up the enemy family. The fierceness and eagerness in Finks' eyes were so obvious. Ilmi beats the enemy, the eldest son of the enemy family, the mind reader of the operation department, the weapon is a nail needle, and has the ability to change his face. Ron explained. Franklin, on the other hand, thought of something, and there was a hint of understanding in his eyes. This person should be the member of the beaten enemy family who was hired by the regimental commander to kill the 10 old men, right? He disguised himself as Siso, and the two exchanged them when we found the little girl before. Franklin's mind was connected with the cause and effect, but more doubts came to mind and he asked directly. Why are you pretending to be Siso, what is the purpose, and where is the real Siso now? Franklin came up to ask 3 questions in a row, pointing out the most core questions. At this time, the chivalrous guest also remembered something and suddenly said. I remember, in this year's list of those who passed the hunter test, there was also a person named Jitaleku, and that person was your pseudonym, right? Is it the same qualified person as the chain hand, the hedgehog-headed little devil, and Ron Siso? You're here, don't tell me it's all a coincidence, there must be some kind of premeditation, right? Finks roared straight out. For the elements outside the brigade, and it is also a person who has a long-standing grudge with them, such as the enemy family, Finks does not know what it means to be polite. When he boarded, his body exploded with amazing mental strength and energy, and no one else had the intention of stopping him. Ron didn't have it either, all Aluga cared about was Kilai, as long as it wasn't Kilai, then if anyone of the enemy family was killed by the Phantom Brigade, Ron wouldn't meddle in it. That silver-haired little devil saw that at that time, the regimental commander hired you to do the timing of the 10 old men, and it didn't matter if you didn't kill them, but since you, the eldest son of the enemy family, ran to provoke us with your eyes, then you must have done some enlightenment. Finks said in a calm tone, taking a step forward. Suddenly, a powerful sense of oppression swept towards the IL fan in an instant. You have too many questions, I'll pick up some that I'm willing to answer. IL fan seemed to be unaware of the attitude of the Phantom Brigade on the field towards him, or simply did not care about them and did not take them to heart. In an indifferent tone, he said to himself, I was hired by Siso to replace him at the expense of him, because he wanted to duel with your leader, and he should be on his way to find your leader now. Hearing this, Marge first froze, and then his face changed suddenly. It's premeditated, and it's not true. Siso sent me a message at 7 o'clock today. As for enlightenment, I have been enlightened since I went out to carry out my first commission. It was good. Ignoring the increasingly gloomy faces of the brigade members, Ilmi continued. Fortunately, you didn't do anything to Xiao Qi, that is, my brother, otherwise even if you hurt him, I would make you pay the price. The sound is so natural, even in the spider base, IL fan is still speaking so loudly, so seriously. After he finished speaking, the bass fell silent again. Many of the spider members looked at Ilmi with strange eyes. They heard that the latter's tone was not fake, and at the end of make you pay, they could also hear the other's determination and threat, and make sure he was not joking. But who do you think you are? Chapter 232. Finks laughed furiously and didn't buy it. At the same time, the Sentong killing machine on Fei Tan's body was also unabashedly cathartic. Let's pay the price? This is our turf, don't be too arrogant, $, bastard. Fei Tan said in a cold voice, the last word, also used his hometown dialect. It can be seen that he is also extremely angry now. When the other party was found surrounded by his own base camp, he also said threatening words without shame. Honestly, Fei Tan had seen a lot of idiots, but he had never really met such an arrogant person. Are the people who beat up the enemy family like this? The more you don't let me do it, the more I'll do it, and after killing you, I'll go find the silver-haired devil and kill him. Fei Tan whispered the bloodiest words. And in the most cruel way, let him experience more pain than death. Whoosh! Before Fei Tan could finish speaking, a strong cracking sound sounded. Several sharp streaks instantly shot in the direction of Fei Tan. And looking at the trajectory and orientation, they are all targets towards the key point of Phaeton. Dang! The umbrella sword was drawn, and under the rotation block, there were several soft sounds. Several white, spherical silver needles fell to the ground at the tail. Under the reflection of the bright moonlight, it has a hint of gloom and at the same time appears particularly sharp. Roar! The speed, the powerful thoughts, and Fei Tan ignored the silver needles on the ground, and his eyes stared at the low pressure all over his body without blinking, and the terrifying killing chi was constantly emerging from his body. Nice killing. If you dare to target Xiao Qi, I'm here and kill you. Ilmi said word for word. Under the influence of the murderous chi that almost condensed into substance, Ilmi's long hair was windless and automatic, and his entire face was covered with black lines, making it impossible to see his expression. Oh! Fei Tan's hand holding the umbrella sword clenched hard again. Then you can try it, and after killing you, I'll kill the silver-haired boy. Whoosh! Bang! Before Fei Tan could finish speaking, Ilmi couldn't help but rush out. Fei Tan also stopped talking and took the sword to meet him. Ping pong! In an instant, the umbrella sword and the silver needle and the sound of the nail sounded inside the empty building. Finks looked sheepishly at Fei Tan and Ilmi, who had already handed over, and said blankly, wasn't it me who talked to him first? Shouldn't it be me, and why is Fei Tan fighting with him? His brain went down for a moment, but it quickly came back to life. As he stepped back, and Franklin and they swept the line for the flying, he complained unceasingly. Fei Tan, you bastard dares to rob my prey, I will not spare you after the fight. Fei Tan in the battlefield did not say a word, obviously fighting with IL fans with all his strength, and did not notice Finks' complaints. Otherwise, with Fei Tan's personality, he would have come back with a shut up long ago. Also somewhat speechless, there was Ron. According to the original trajectory, Phaeton definitely did not have a hand with Ilmi, otherwise he would definitely be questioned by the members after Pico Noda returned to the base. If nothing else, it turned out that no one noticed the strange appearance of Ilmi, and he took the opportunity to sneak out when his face could not be maintained at all. It also alarmed some people, but obviously it didn't have much impact. And now he has been called out by me, which has aroused the vigilance of the members of the brigade, so he has revealed his identity very barely, and has he warned the brigade because of strange things? Ron thought helplessly. As a brother, because he was worried about his dear brother, there was nothing wrong with doing such a thing. But you also have to pick a suitable time, like him, who originally has the meaning of disguising Siso to provoke the brigade, and then a warning, who can be fried off. Especially Fei Tan's violent temper, two people meet like this, it is simply a thunder and fire, and it is difficult to think of not moving. But fight it. The harder you play, the better. It is better to be able to fight both sides and lose both seriously injured and die, so that it will all be cheaper for me. Keep fighting. Ron thought without malice. Next to him, March was frowning at the phone. Why don't you call Pike to explain what happened to Siso? The warrior who was always paying attention to the battlefield asked March without turning his eyes. The man who beat up the enemy family replaced Siso, causing the latter to go to their leader. Then he must have fallen behind Pikonoda to follow her. In this case, even if they violated the terms of the transaction between them and the chain man, the life of their leader would most likely be lost. March could figure it out, and the chivalrous could naturally figure it out, so he asked such a question. No, although Siso broke the agreement, my intuition felt that the regimental commander should be fine this time. After Pike was gone, I felt that way. And after this person's identity was revealed, let us know of Siso's intentions, my feelings have not changed, which means that the regiment leader should be fine. In addition, Siso is a very cunning person, and I always feel that there is a special connection between him and the chain hand. Moreover, Siso's goal has always been to fight with the regimental commander, so he will never kill the regimental commander, which is not a feeling, but from the analysis of his personality, the regimental commander, there will be no danger. March said quickly, and when she finished, she remained silent and put the phone back in her pocket. The chivalrous guests on the side and Kyubi, who had no sense of existence, were silent for a while, and then looked at the battle on the field. Apparently, the two toilet-troubled brothers also agreed with March's statement. In the field, only the sound of Fei Tan and Yeermi fighting and weapons colliding was heard. As a good player who was evaluated by Siso as a 95-point player, the strength naturally need not be said. Flying Tan carries the mark of Brigade No. 2, which was second only to Kurilo when it was founded, coupled with the asceticism stimulated by Ron during this time, and did not fall behind in the fight with Ilfin. Chapter 233. If it is not for the fear that Ilfan may be the mind of the operation department, in case he is controlled and left a little hand, otherwise he is full of firepower, and the fight that cannot be said to be seen will be upgraded again by a grade. However, the comparison of strength between Fei Tan and Ilmi is not easy to say. The percentage scale given by Siso is based on a 100-point rating standard. When the president was elected, he gave Ilfans a 95-point evaluation, which is actually equivalent to showing that he thinks that Ilfans and his strength are comparable. And at that time, it was still Ilfan who incarnated into Jitalagu, and the strength did not know whether it was hidden or not. As for the Phantom Brigade, Siso's goal was always only Kurilo, and he had no interest in the other members of the brigade. When the brigade first came out, Nobunaga once touched his chin and commented, his move telescopic love is also quite powerful. Fei Tan and a few of them also commented on a few words, that is, several people probably fought with Siso, but none of them aroused Siso's interest. Siso's assessment of them was that long crooked apples have no value in hand to hand. On the one hand, it is equal to their own strength, and it is even possible to surpass their own Ilfans, on the other hand, they are not interested, and the long crooked fruit is flying to them. In contrast to the two, it will appear that the strength of Yeerfan is vaguely above Fei Tan and others. Thunderbolt Pong! Whoosh! As the two men fought and the situation intensified, suddenly, a large amount of paper emerged from the cracked windows and cracks in the walls of the building. Hey! At the first moment when the piece of paper appeared, Fei Tan and Yeermi touched a move and then retreated from each other. What is this? Looking at the white pieces of paper flying in the sky, like snowflakes falling, Ron's eyes were first a little confused, and then a clear color appeared. This is Kurt's snakebite dance and paper blowing snow. It seems that Ilmi is not the kind of person who is too impulsive. I know that there are still helpers. After realizing this, he looked at the separated Ilmi and Phaeton, as well as the members of the brigade who were on guard around, and had some regrets. It seems that it is impossible to fight, and the situation of both sides being injured cannot appear. Looking at the paper flowers floating in the sky, Ilmi also shook his head. It seems that I was still a little impulsive, wasted a little more time, and fought some unnecessary battles. Anyway, with Xi Suo at the place of negotiation, Xiao Qi's safety problem is not to worry. If they still want to be unfavorable to Xiao Qi later, the silver needle on his head is enough for him to take refuge. Well, but this group of people in the brigade is crazy and don't make two-handed preparations. Mom seems to be intent on letting Kurt go out on his own, or let him join the brigade in place of Siso to take care of one. Ilmi's mind spun rapidly, and his body made an instant move. With a slight tip of his toes, the whole person immediately ran towards the wall cut out of white paper. Kicked to the face that was already a little shaky, in the vigilant and silent eyes of the brigade members and others, the figure of Ilmi disappeared into the vast night. After Ilmi left, the paper flowers and pieces of paper floating in the air, as if they had lost their mind power bonus, suddenly fell to the ground. Wu! Fei Tan boss was unhappy to use his umbrella sword to cut a pile of white paper in front of him into pieces. Are there any other helpers? Not only did he have the ability to manipulate the paper, but from the confrontation just now, Fei Tan also knew that the other party did have the strength to match his arrogant words. If it weren't for the fact that the situation was unclear now, I didn't know the other party's ability to read and how many helpers there were. The regimental commander had not finished the exchange and could not act rashly. Fei Tan would have chased out long ago. Forget it, leave or leave, at least there is no big problem. Franklin said solemnly, and then continued to close his eyes and recuperate. Finks glanced at Franklin, then at the collapsing wall, opened his mouth, and closed it in vain. After returning to calm, the others once again went their separate ways, and the base returned to its original appearance. It was as if the previous incident of Ilmi was just a trivial episode, or even did not happen. Meanwhile, under the stars and moonlit nights, you're doing a loss-making business. On a wilderness street far from the abandoned building, Kurt, a doll-headed women's clothing boss in a dark purple kimono, relentlessly accuses Ilfans. Siso only gave you money to disguise for him, not to fight the members of the brigade. I know, but there's always something a little bit out of control. That's because you're not mature enough. Ilmi looked at himself with a look of reasonable accusation, and his brother, who was not tall enough to reach his chest, did not speak. Kurt, who is currently only 10 years old, does not have the slightest awareness that he is a little fart. Is it the right thing to do to get Kurt into contact with the Phantom Brigade now? Ilfan felt the need to consider Kurt's personality and maturity first. Kurt's strength is very high among his peers, even the current Qi Li and Xiao Ji are not his opponents. This strength gave Kurt his own pride, and after joining the brigade, he thought he was the second strength position of the brigade. However, in the process of arriving at Meteor Street and destroying the chimeric ants, he realized that his strength was quite small in the brigade. Now he is just a little teenager who is planning to take his third brother home, and his personality is a little arrogant. At the time when IL fans are worried about whether it is appropriate for Kurt to join the Phantom Brigade at this stage. Inside the base, with the slow passage of time, the agreed 0 hour has long passed. Just when Finks was a little restless, there was a slight sound of footsteps outside the base. Swish! All eyes were on the entrance to the base. Pike, you're back. What about the regimental commander? When the figure came into view, Finks, who had long been unable to hold back, asked directly. Commander, he can't come here anymore. Picanato looked around and said quietly. Are you ready to decide? Others may not have noticed, but Ron clearly felt the firm determination of Picnata's words, and a slight sense of enlightenment and liberation. Chapter 234. Hey! Finks' eyes froze, and just as he was about to get angry, he saw Piconota take out a pistol from his waist. 6 bullets were then embodied, loaded, and the muzzle was aimed at them. Hey! Pike, are you really under control this time? Finks' anger vanished, with only shock and a hint of disbelief, mixed with some concern for his companions. No, said March with a somewhat serious look, believe her, she's Pike. March, Flying, Franklin, Finks, Chick, Ku, are you still willing to believe in my bullets? Not caring about Finks' suspicions, Piconota said with a smile. Her memory flicks can only hit 6 rounds at a time, and the 6 names she chants are the members who joined the brigade after its creation. Peeling Lev, who is even less existential than Kyubi, and Ron, who joined last, are watching the play from the sidelines. Fei Tan listened to Picnota's words, frowning and not saying a word, while Marge seemed to understand something instantly. Pike, don't you say. Both are sensitive people, and they have some vague predictions about Parker's actions. Bang! Before March could finish speaking, 6 bullets shot out at the same time and flew towards the doors of the 6 men's heads. I didn't betray the brigade. Picanata smiled at the corners of her mouth, listened to the sound of the chains that demanded her life, and her heart ached, and the whole person completely lost consciousness, and her body slowly fell to the ground in the eyes of everyone. Pike. Cool Lapika, he's okay, right? Xiaoji stood outside the door and asked with some concern. It's normal, after everything is over, the tense body is completely relaxed, and it is easy to be invaded by some diseases. Qi Li shrugged his shoulders and comforted him. I felt this way when I first killed people, but it wasn't as serious as the Kula pickup. As the two talked, the door opened and Lialai, who was a temporary doctor, came out. The high fever does not go away. I gave him a little anti-fever medicine to stabilize the situation first, and then say, it has not yet reached the point of endangering his life. After Liu Li finished speaking, Xiaoji was relieved. I'll take care of the Kula pickup. Don't you want to participate in today's auction? Xianpai has already bought your admission tickets for you. Liu Li said, and Melody also came out of the room, nodding at everyone. Xiaoji, this is a big thing about being able to find your father. Go and get busy with your side of things, just leave it to us, and when you come back, you will definitely give you a healthy cool pickup. Liu Li patted his chest in assurance, and Melody smiled and nodded. Xiaoji is not a pretentious person, and after thinking about the phone call between himself and Jin, he is even more determined. Then everything is up to you. Even if it's wrapped up in us. Inside the base of the abandoned building, next to Nobunaga's grave, there is a new grave. Again there is no tombstone, only a simple cross. The members of the brigade, who learned of the cause and effect, silently buried Piccolta. The dead Wakan, Nobunaga, Pictorial plus the restricted regimental leader and the voluntarily withdrawn Siso. Well, Siso had left the Phantom Brigade in search of other delicious fruits. This time the assemblage of the Phantom Brigade was not halved by the death of its members, as the prophetic poem says. But this situation is only slightly better than the halving, but it also pays a heavy price. In other words, it seems that every time the Phantom Brigade assembles, there will be some moths. The last assembly operation 3 years ago was that the claws were killed, and the shadow withdrew from Siso to take over. This time it was a little more tragic than the last time, and people didn't know what to say. After the burial of Picnolda, several of the miscreants who had come out of death countless times quickly walked out of the trap and set the tone for the next action. Look for a mind remover to remove the thoughts planted by the chained hand for their leader. After the removal of the thoughts, it is time to find the chained hand to settle the account. However, the teacher has always been rare and not easy to find for a while, so you can go to find it separately first, and when you find a suitable candidate, you will regroup by telephone notification. However, before setting out to find the exorcist, go find the Relt family first. Nobunaga can't just die in vain. Finks said in a deep voice. Finks, who has long been passive and has not moved his hands, is eager to do a big job now. I'm in favor of it. Fei Tan also put his hands in his pockets to respond to the channel. Are you going to get into trouble with the Relt family? Using restraints and vows, Ron, who had already touched Piccolo through the grave, had the same expression, put his hand in his pocket, pressed twice on his mobile phone and sent a message. Since the other side can injure the regimental commander and kill Nobunaga, then the strength must be very strong. Franklin said, getting up slowly. Chivalrous, Koob and March, the 3 of you stay here, and the rest of you go to the Relt family to see what happens. Moving his knuckles, Franklin's body began to rise in a certain momentum. In his eyes, there seemed to be a burning flame. He is an old and good person, but the more honest and calm a person he is, the more terrible he is to get angry. He will be more terrible than others. Obviously, this series of events not only made Fink's grumpy and strengthened system, but also made this good old man move a real fire. The chivalrous people who remained were all the types that were not good at fighting. Franklin took away all members of the pure martial arts faction, including Ron. No one had any opinions, and a group led by Franklin greeted the first rays of the morning sun and disappeared into the building in an instant. Meanwhile, in the hotel of the Relt family, members of the Phantom Brigade want to come to me for trouble. Aren't they all dead? Relt looked confused and looked at Kay Taylor in front of him who had sent him the letter. Chapter 235. No, the last time we found their bodies were fake, they were fake deaths. The puppet K. Taylor explained to him as much as possible. Now that one of their companions has died in Yokiksen City, they suspect that they have a relationship with the members of the assassination group, so I came to the person who asked you to join the assassination squad in the first place. Relt said, rubbing his temples. The bodyguard Marshal Uncle Pai Cassie on the side had a look of eagerness. He had joined the assassination squad before and had no sense of presence at all. Without even seeing the face of the Phantom Brigade, and without even giving a hand, he got the news that the Phantom Brigade had been destroyed. This made him depressed, and now after learning that the Phantom Brigade was not dead but was going to come up to find trouble, he was immediately interested, and his hands felt a little itchy. Well, if they dare to come, they just let them come and can't leave. Unexpectedly, Ralt didn't have the panicked expression he had before when he heard that the Yin Beast had been completely destroyed. The last time I was forced to fake death by the power of the 10 old men and the members of the assassination team, the Phantom Brigade was no more than that, at best it was just a bandit with some strength. And I have received the inheritance of many old men, and with the help of the upcoming dream auction in Yokiksen City, I have a relationship with many rich people. Especially the world's richest man, Batra, I've already hooked up with him, and it's not easy to borrow a few of his ace bodyguards to deal with the thieves of the Phantom Brigade. It just so happens that none of them are dead, and I want to use their heads to completely establish my power in the gang. After saying that, Rel took out his mobile phone and began dialing. Mosi, is it Mr. Batra? That's right, I think. After a phone call, Relt smiled triumphantly and sat leisurely on the couch sipping red wine. His style of doing things made Kettle on the side silent. He had already said what he should have said, and this was the other party himself on the pole to go against the Phantom Brigade, then he couldn't help it. Anyway, his commission, as early as he brought the news that the 10 old men of Lirt were dead, and after getting confirmation, the other party did not hesitate to give him a perfect evaluation. That is to say, his task has actually been completed, and the next thing has nothing to do with him. Then you are free to go, I will go down first. Looking at both Pixie and Lirt with a confident expression, K. Taylor was slightly silent and walked out. No sooner had he stepped out of the doorway than he saw 2 unexpected figures. Uncle Taylor, we all heard that it was the members of the Phantom Brigade who came, right? At the door, Julissa looked at Kettle with a pitiful expression and said, followed by a tangled and flattering smile of origami yellow hair hue rose. I heard them all with sound waves, and I can reach them, and there are 5 extremely fast figures rushing towards us, and depending on your speed, they are not at all what we can handle, and in a short time, they will arrive here. Julissa said, her eyes slightly overshot, with a slight sobbing sound. I just came out to earn a job, and I don't want to die like the Salvado brothers. Uncle Kettle, do you have any good solutions? Julissa said, and Hugh rose next to her also nodded vigorously. You retract that disguised appearance before you speak. Kettle glanced at her obliquely and said. Julissa immediately stopped pumping, and the faint tears next to her eyes instantly dissipated invisible. The expression on his face changed, making Hugh rose next to him stunned. Out of the bodyguard industry, how can it be a simple little cute sister? K. Taylor shook his head and took a step toward the other room. This is not the place to talk. Julissa and Hugh rose immediately followed. For a time, the bodyguard corps within the Lyrt family was secretly divided into 2 factions. Have you arrived? After crossing a few blocks, Franklin and they saw the hotel with the distinctive logo of the Relt family. However, I saw that the window observation deck on a certain floor was wide open, and there were still several figures standing there, as if they were greeting them. It seems they knew in advance that we would come. Fei Tan squinted and muffled. According to the information given by the chivalrous guest, there is a person in the other family who uses the ability to read sound waves, and I am afraid that this is how to know our goal. Franklin said quietly. I remember, is there another guy in their family who is good at origami? Peel Left suddenly asked in a loud voice. Origami, pieces of paper, is it true that another accomplice who received and beat up a member of the enemy family on the morning yesterday was also a member of this family? There is a possibility that this family is also one of the members of the original assassination group, and it may also have a connection with the family of beating enemies who are also members of the regiment, and may also help when necessary. Franklin groaned and said. Ka ba. The crisp sound of the knuckles of the fingers sounded. Very good, I am now more eager to find their boss to ask for an understanding. The corners of Fink's mouth revealed a cruel and vicious smile, and his fingers and wrists could not stop moving. Fei Tan didn't speak, but the slight murderous chi around him was once again thickened. Origami, pieces of paper. Ron, who was slightly behind, was slightly speechless. Well, it wasn't just the Payakasi, but even the yellow-haired Hugh Rose was being watched by the group, and there was a 3-second silence for the poor guy. Several people kept walking and quickly approached the hotel building. Meanwhile, Rielt was inside a lounge next door. Sneeze. Yellow-haired Hugh Rose sneezed, then rubbed his nose, and looked at the bamboo Lisa with an eager expression and said to Kay Taylor. Uncle Taylor, what do you think we should do? We can't cope with such an opponent at all. Then don't deal with it. Kay Taylor said for a long time. Anyway, I will not come forward, my tasks have been completed, the evaluation has been obtained, who is willing to come forward? Who comes forward? Chapter 236. Zhu Lisha was speechless for an instant, and Hugh Rose was also twitching at the corners of his mouth. You got the rating, but we haven't. That Uncle Taylor, you can help. No, show us the way. Zhu Lisha said with big twinkling eyes. The eagerness and anxiety in her eyes were so obvious. The group is about to go upstairs, and I. Seeing that she was not pretending this time, but really about to cry, Kay Taylor shook her head and said. I can tell you very clearly that if you are right with that group of people, you will have absolutely no chance of surviving. Even if Ryder had brought in Batra's bodyguards, it would have been the same, and they had already doomed them without leaving here in the first place. There are only two paths in front of you, one is to die with them dutifully, and the other is to quickly hide, whether it is dereliction of duty or not, at least life is still preserved. When Kay Taylor finished speaking, he stopped talking and let the two of them get into a decision. I don't want to die. Hugh Rose gritted his teeth and said. It's a big deal to change a job, anyway, there is the ability to read on the body, really can't go to the Sky Arena to grab a wave of money, from now on, it is better than dying. Zhu Lisha's lips moved, and finally she sank into the sofa. In fact, they already knew that there was only one way to choose, but they were still a little reluctant. And Keetle ruthlessly tore open the fluke in their hearts, making them miserable at the same time, but also made up their minds not to tangle any more. That, Uncle Taylor. After making a choice, Zhu Lisha suddenly said with some trepidation. What are your plans for the future? My intentions? Why would you want to ask this question? I think. Follow you. Zhu Lisha suddenly raised her head and said solemnly. Hugh Rose next to him was also slightly stunned, and then quickly nodded like a kowtow. Follow me. Work? Keetle's face was somewhat strangely repeated. Yes, Uncle Taylor, I have received a lot of commissions before, but I only feel enough security in you, so I think it will be very promising to follow you. Zhu Lisha said it very seriously. But you should know that I am a solo traveler, a companion. I know, the pattern I'm talking about is that if Uncle Taylor needs extra manpower, if you have anything to do, you can hire us at that time, and I usually won't pestering you. Zhu Lisha said quite earnestly, and a little disappointed. After all, after today, we basically can't mix in the bodyguard world, we have to find a way back, right? Hugh Rose was also silent. Keitel gives them a good sense, old and heavy, not weak, experienced, these are his strengths, if you hook up with such a person, you can't get a good job. That's it. After listening to the two people's mental self-descriptions, Kay Taylor was also slightly chin up. These two people have been able to mix in the bodyguard world for a while, and the strength and experience are certain. And there is nothing wrong with the two of them, and it is slightly awkward to die, that is, Hugh Rose. But looking at him like this, he can also be regarded as a person who has been taught by society, and he knows that it is time to converge in the future. As for the level of business, that is, the ability to read, these days of getting along, Puppet Kay Taylor has long known. Because of her gifted voice and singing voice, the bamboo Lisa is able to change chi into sound waves and sound waves. It can attack the enemy or use it as a radar to detect and track, which is a very convenient and practical ability. Hugh Rose's origami ability cannot be underestimated either. Mindfulness ability, origami life. Effect, after folding the original appearance of an item with paper, you can transform the paper item into reality. The more realistic the item is folded, the more realistic the transformation. Limitation, only items can be transformed, and the more complex the items are transformed into reality, the more mind power will be consumed, and once the consumed mind power exceeds the mind power it currently holds, the transformation fails. Hugh Rose's ability to change the mind is similar to an anime on Earth in Ron's previous life, the Divine Pen Marion. Items drawn with a magic pen will change from pictures to real objects. In Hugos's case, it is only the use of the magic pen as a mental ability, and the painting becomes origami. However, this ability also has limitations. It is not like the magic pen Ma Yang. The bug can draw creatures such as cattle and sheep into reality, but it can only be realized. And this ability is based on thoughts, and if Hugh Rose wants to fold an atomic bomb, it is not impossible, provided that his mind power is enough to support the transformation. The two of them are very supportive in their mindfulness, and they will not be useful to them in the future. Their own positioning should not be that type of martial arts faction. To be a bodyguard type bodyguard, it is indeed a little bit of a mistake to go down the wrong path. Kay Taylor thought about it, and just when he wanted to make a sound, he saw Julissa standing up. They're coming up. Julissa's face was full of panic, which made Hugh Ross's face on the side also a little heavy and ugly. Rest assured, they are just looking for the trouble of Rield, and for you two little characters, they don't value it at all, just find a hidden place to hide. As soon as Keitler finished speaking, he saw the two of them jump out and run toward several hidden small rooms. In response, Keitl just shook his head, and then quietly paid attention to the movement next door. He wasn't worried about being discovered, and it wasn't a big deal to be found. This thing and he didn't. Well, it's a bit of a relationship, but the brigade is obviously not clear. Plus he's just a puppet, dead is dead, let Ron redo one is. Meanwhile, in the luxurious balcony room with a view next door. Are you the welcome brigade? Relt shook the wine glass in his hand very gracefully, and looked at the strangely dressed person at the door with contempt. It doesn't look good either. In front of and around him, Picasso and a few tall bodyguards in black suits and sunglasses stood there, full of power. Chapter 237. Flamboyance is enough, but... is this guy an idiot? Think you can stop us with these people alone? Peeling Leff held out his fist and pointed to the Rald in front of him. This group of fierce-looking bodyguards was not even a little threatening in their eyes. Who knows, and we haven't killed such self-righteous idiots. Fei Tan spoke of reality mercilessly, and Relt's reaction and performance of thinking that everything was under control was like a clown scratching his head in their eyes. Well, it's important. This group of people should not be the suspected mysterious Pai Cassie, they are too weak, are they hidden in the shadows or not here? Franklin's eyes quickly looked at everyone in the circle and said in a wary tone. Wouldn't it be okay to just be that idiot? Finks immediately jumped out. Hey, do you guys have a guy named Pictacy here, give me out. Finks' voice was loud and clearly reached everyone's ears. The black-clad bodyguards all stood still, while Ralt and his martial arts uncle Pai Cassie frowned. The other party's style made them very unhappy, and they felt very unflattering as a gentleman villain, martial artist. Oh, sure enough, it's just a bunch of thieves and criminals who can't get on the table. When Leert thought of this, his eyes were even more contemptuous. What's the big deal in waiting for you? Picarthy stood up and said in a deep voice under the look in Leert's eyes. At the same time as speaking, he also put up a shelf of martial artists of the genre, which was very compelling and flamboyant. You're that Pai Casey? Finks was stunned when he saw this middle-aged man who had emerged. This person is also too weak, right? Hey, no kidding. We're looking for the real Pakashi, not stand-ins and imposters like you. Finks' tone was extremely unkind. When Pikashi heard this, he was also stunned, and then his face sank. In the next name Pikashi, never have any stand-ins, are you? Wait, what does this mean? Finks, Franklin interrupted Finks, who was still trying to speak, the picture of Pikashi on the data is him, and his appearance is correct. That could also be the ability to change its appearance. Fei Tan's eyes were sharp as a knife. The president has a transfer student reading ability who can change his appearance, maybe this person who can use a variety of reading abilities also has the ability to read. As he spoke, Fei Tan's hand reached out of his pocket and put 4 fingers together. Let me interrogate it. Immediately, Fei Tan's body exploded with a powerful amount of thoughts and chi, sweeping the whole field. Whoosh! In the frantic faces of the Pai Cassie and a black-clad bodyguard, Fei Tan's figure suddenly disappeared. Snort! With a soft cracking sound, the smell of blood suddenly spread. Did the fight start? Kettle in the next room sensed the wave of thoughts and looked up, and quickly fell. Compared with the 2 bodyguards who were still in office, he was as steady as an old dog, and he was still playing with his mobile phone with great emotion. At the same time, he had already figured out how to arrange Julisha and Hugh Rose. Beep pressed twice, and he sent out the things he had just talked about and his thoughts in the form of a text message. The recipient shows Ron. The battle came and went quickly, and this group of men in black, who claimed to be the bodyguards of the world's richest man, Bartra's ace, could not last 2 rounds in the hands of Phaeton and Finks. It was impossible for Bartra to lend his personal bodyguard to Relt, and even if he had, it would have been impossible to stop the brigade. In the original version, when escorting the Island of Greed, the group of bodyguards did not take a few moves in the hands of Phaeton and others, let alone the current group of people. Rielt's red wine did not shake any more, and he looked at the corpses on the ground in front of him. When Finks threw Pixie, who had been beaten half to death and still had a breath, he came back from his sluggishness. He jerked his head, the wine glass in his hand tilted, and the liquid in the glass spilled on his upper body. The lips trembled, and the whole person looked incomparably embarrassed, even if he had the calmness before. This guy is really weak enough, it's impossible for such a guy to injure the regiment leader. Finks kicked Pixie on the side of his foot, a look of disgust. Wouldn't it really be changed? I'll have to wait until I interrogate them one by one before I draw conclusions. Phaeton said, striding towards the slumped chair. There is something to say. Well. A scream marked the beginning of the torture. Ron retracted his gaze after a glance, and he had no interest in Phaeton's cruel torture. Nor would he feel sympathy for Relt. It was indeed he who advocated that Keetle and send Cassie join the assassination group against the brigade, and it was the chivalrous who found him. Even before he came, Ron had sent a message to remind him that he was not willing to leave. Who could blame himself? What's more, he is still a gangster. Sympathetic to the gangs? No kidding. After taking out his mobile phone to read the message, Ron replied with a yes, leaned against the wall, and looked out of his mind outside the observation deck. Relt and Paikashi were not iron-blooded tough guys, and before Phaeton could do anything cruel to them, the two were overwhelmed. Relt spit out the arrangements he had made during his time in Yokiksen City, including arranging for the Salvado brothers to attack Wojin and not returning, and Kettler bringing back the message that the 10 old men were dead. Paikashi also had a snot in his eyes, spitting out the monotonous things he had done in the genre, completely devoid of the mastery style he had before. They thought they wouldn't have to endure such pain if they said it all, but they couldn't guess Phaeton's personality. In the case that Phaeton had just come to feel that he had not yet reached his own pleasure, the two of them confessed in a panic, which was undoubtedly a very unpleasant and uninteresting thing for him. Chapter 238. As a result, the interrogation expected by the two did not stop, but on the contrary, it was once again aggravated by a level, making people cry uncontrollably. Even Key Taylor in the next room and Hugh Rose and Julissa, who were hiding, could hear it clearly. The latter two are even more glad that they did not take the lead, otherwise they would have fallen into such a miserable situation of life and death. For a while, even the breathing slowed down, and the death of the Absolute launched. In the room, although Franklin, Finks, and the others got answers from the Relter, they were dissatisfied with their answers. Pikazi is only one? Haven't heard of any mysterious people? Many of the people in the assassination group were found by the 10 old men? Do you mean that to find the mysterious man with great strength, you have to ask the 10 idiots who have died? Several people all remained silent, allowing Phaeton to act on the two, ignoring the incessant screams. Do you want to find other bodyguards and drag them out for interrogation? Seeing that the two of them really couldn't extract any other useful value, PLF couldn't help but suggest. I'm afraid those bodyguards were already scared to run away. Finks clasped his hands to his chest and looked at the weeping android and sneered mercilessly. I just used the circle to investigate, and there was no trace of any other mind-reading person, either they all left or hid it with the Absolute dot. But looking at the black-clad bodyguards in this place, I'm afraid that the guys he hired before should have escaped and run away. From Pakashi's interrogation, they learned that the guy named Hugh Rose, although he played with origami, was not the kind of person who manipulated the system's ability to control the pieces of paper. And they learned that the origami Hugh Rose had not been out of the hotel yesterday, and the surveillance had a clear image of him. In other words, the partner who helped beat the members of the enemy family to escape yesterday was not Hugh Ross. Although they all use paper as a medium, they are not the same ability. In addition, the brigade also got a very bad news. When Bekida Hotel Nobunaga was killed and Kurilo was taken away, all the bodyguards of the Rared family stayed in the hotel and did not go out. Fundamentally, it is even clear that the mysterious person is from the Lyrt family. Although there are also various mental abilities, such as the Fen body, it is possible to create the suspicion of alibi. But there was no doubt that Casey and Ryder didn't know what was going on, and the rest of the bodyguards seemed to have fled. That is, the clue is once again interrupted. Such news made Finks look good, and also made Fei Tan's hand heavier. It wasn't until the two men passed out with bloodied faces that Fei Tan was overwhelmed. What do we do next? Finks looked all over the floor. Some impatience said. How could that mysterious man not find the news, is that all? He held his chest with both hands, his fingers constantly tapping on his arms, and spoke at a fast speed. Since the other party is hidden, it should be more jealous of ours. Ron also stood up at this time and brushed a wave of presence, saying like a decent. The regimental commander also said before that the other party used so many reading abilities, but he did not find a limit. My guess is either that this restriction is hidden deeply, or that it will explode and pay the price after the fact. According to my opinion, the second possibility is relatively large. He must have borne a heavy price, otherwise in the previous Becky's hotel, he should not have just killed Nobunaga and retreated, at least he would have tried to test me and March and the others. But he only made a hand once, and then he fled quickly without follow-up action, so I personally think he should have suffered a rather heavy reaction. Only let him shoot once, and the rest is a little self-preservation power. So, next we still focus on the action of finding the leader of the regiment to get rid of the teacher. The mysterious person has shown no signs so far, it seems that it should not appear again in the short term. Ron shrugged and casually analyzed, causing Franklin to frown at them. Such an analysis was casually made up by Ron and was very unconvincing. But because there is really no good way at present, the clues of the mysterious people have been interrupted again, and their leader still needs to be distracted, and this matter really has to be put aside first. If that's the case, when everyone acts in the future, be a little more vigilant and don't act alone as much as possible. After a slight silence, Franklin said. It doesn't matter how it is, anyway, I still act according to my own ideas, if he dares to come to me. Fei Tan said and raised his hand. Just let him come. Poof. Burst. Two soft sounds, the head fell to the ground. The decline of the underworld family, which marks the imminent rise of a generation, is not a relief for them. Let's go, it's a waste of time to stay here any longer. Several people left the compartment without turning back, and Ron finally looked at the corpses in the room, shook his head slightly, and followed behind. Faintly, I also heard the conversation between Fei Tan and Finks in front of me. I heard that this time the dream auction has a lot of good things to auction, and I plan to go to see it. Then I'll go with you to Phaeton. Aren't you also interested in games in addition to reading books? It seems that this time the auction will also auction off a very famous game. The sound faded away, and in the blink of an eye, it disappeared into the building. Tick-tock. In an empty purgatory-like room, only the sound of blood and the dripping of liquid from broken wine glasses reverberates through the room. Why don't you listen to advice? At the door of the room, Kay Taylor, who could not hear the movement, came over, looked at the tragic situation in front of him, and sighed very much. Fortunately. Luckily we didn't make a head. Behind Kaylor, Hugh Rose and Zhu Lisha were also trembling like sieves, only feeling cold from the brain door to the hands and feet. Especially seeing the wounds of the torture on the bodies of Paikashi and their employer, Lirt, made them swallow the spit and then feel a little sick to their stomachs. Chapter 239. Even if this time doesn't affect my personal credibility, I don't want to be in the bodyguard industry anymore, it's more dangerous than I thought. Hugh Rose and Julissa both spoke in unison. Then they looked closely at Kettle on the side. You can rest assured, the good guy is also a colleague, I have helped you find a good home. Kay Taylor smiled hoarsely at them. Thank you so much, Uncle Taylor. The two were overjoyed. Zhu Lisha couldn't wait to ask, so Uncle Taylor, what is the job you are looking for us? Facing the burning gaze of Zhu Lisha, Kettle warned in advance, looking is to help you find it, but if you want to be approved by the other party to hire, you have to look at your own skills. Of course, I'm sure I won't push you into the fire pit. We get it. The two of them immediately turned to each other and said very politely, if Uncle Taylor needs our help in anything in the future, we will be on call. Kay Taylor nodded satisfactorily. So careful to help them find a job, of course, is to let them admit this feeling, in the future there is a need to naturally call them to work. As for the next home they are looking for. Kai Taylor touched the mobile phone in his pocket, and the words Xiaoji on the interface were particularly obvious. Nampi's auction is the full name of Dream Auction. It is completely different from the underground auction, it is a good channel for the gangs to revel, the 10 old men to show their might, and the underworld family to compete for financial resources. On the contrary, it is a signboard on the table in Yokiksen City, and it is an upper-class auction that attracts the whole world on the surface. Most of the fame and praise that Yokiksen City has gained in the world comes from this auction. Celebrities, gentlemen, and aristocrats, rich and powerful. These are all important parts of a fantasy auction. If the underground auction is the place where the gangsters show their arms and wrists, then the dream auction is a game between the upper echelons. Darkness and light, two very different worlds, but they both express the same meaning through the form of auctions. The dream auction will be held in the most luxurious and spacious hall of Yokiksen's house. There are many celebrities all over the world, but there are not so many people who are too late to participate, who are not interested, etc. Therefore, in order to be able to fill the seats and earn a wave of extra money by the way, the dream auction specially sold the tickets. A ticket of 4 million rings is an acceptable number for the wealthy and celebrities, and an acceptable number for those upstarts who are eager to get in touch with high society and other middle-class people who have no access. Don't underestimate the follow-up impact of this ticket. It is likely that the business of millions and tens of millions of nuns will be generated during the time when the auction is held. Those big guys are even discussing cooperation in the unit of hundreds of millions. This is not only an auction, but also a unique business exchange meeting. Therefore, the dream auction will harvest a wave of fame while also harvesting tickets. Although the big part is the advertising fee, well, yes, the auction is named by the advertiser. Otherwise, Yokiksen City would not have enough financial resources to support it in collecting many rare auction items. Fei Tan and Fengs, as thieves, naturally will not pay for tickets. They casually found a high-end car outside that was targeting the auction, and not only grabbed 2 tickets and 2 suits that fit, but also sent a car of people to see God. After leaving the Relt family hotel, Ron had a phone call with his second brother Miji. The two agreed to wait for the end of the morning auction and meet each other at noon. For the dream auction, Ron also has some interest. After buying a ticket with some of the property he earned from playing with dice and betting, Ron also got a suit to put on and walked into the glittering, dazzling auction hall. After Ron entered the auction hall, he found that the entire auction hall was divided into 4 regional chapters of ABCD, and the strange items such as the Island of Greed were sold in the B division. Ron was not interested in Class A relics and antiques, Class C treasures, diamond treasures, and Class D commemorative collection items, so he followed Fei Tan and Fengs to Area B. After sitting in a seat some distance away from Fei Tan and Fengs, Ron began to take out the harvest of these 2 days to check. Apertures from Nobunaga and Pechner. Nobunaga's body felt 4 apertures, and on Pechnoda's body, there were 3. Martial Arts Talent Intermediate Essence of Mindfulness Sword Talent Intermediate Advanced Sword Drawing. These are the 4 items that Ron found from Nobunaga's body, and it is very surprising that he did not feel Nobunaga's ability to read. However, if there is none, it is not felt, which shows that Nobunaga's mind-reading ability is not suitable for Ron. Ron had expected it, after all, he was not a Ronin samurai like Nobunaga. Next came Pechnoda's, and in addition to the inherent essence of mind chi and martial talent elementary, the third was her mindfulness ability. Mindfulness ability, Memory Explorer. Effect: as long as the other person's body is touched and the relevant question is asked, the relevant memory can be extracted from the deep in the cerebral cortex. It can also be turned into a memory bomb and punched into the head of a companion to realize the sharing of memory. Using the same method to fight back, the extracted person can make the other party lose memory and become a baby, with a maximum of 6 bullets at a time. Restrictions: touch the person's body and ask questions. Parker Noda's ability to read. Ron has long known the effect, which can be said to be a very practical mind ability. This is equivalent to an advanced version of his mind-reading ability Portal of the Mind, which is more accurate and practical. In addition to the essence of the mind to keep in case the power of the deflation machine caused a riot and the talent aperture was thrown into the space backpack, Ron slapped the rest of the useful aperture on his head door one by one. After not attracting much attention, Ron quietly waited for the auction to begin. Chapter 240. Then, after watching Fei Tan and Fengs meet by chance with Jay and Qi Li, who are also here, and then chase them out, Ron shook his head and looked through the list of strange auction items in his hand. What is the fossil dragon dung of General Bart's dragon, the horn scales of the few remaining bighorn bears in the world, the broken horns of the most ferocious pig with a loud nose? Then, the most eye-catching is the Greedy Island game published by Maryland Games Co., Limited, which is said to be targeted by the world's richest man, Batla, and this auction is aimed at it. In 1988, the rich man Bartra openly offered to buy the game for 17 billion rings and 50 billion yen to buy the level-breaking memory card, but until now no one has asked, and the Island of Greed has become an undefeated legend in the video game industry. The game is a collection of card carriers mediated by mindfulness, and a surreal fantasy video game is created on an unknown island. As soon as the game was launched, about 20,000 people rushed to order it, and soon after it disappeared from the market. Only various intelligence related to it appeared on the internet. Although it is called a fantasy game, it is only a few people who are praising it, and when it first appeared in public auctions, it was H in terms of the difficulty of finding, which belonged to the easiest category. After all, a total of 100 sets were issued, which is a large number in terms of the standard of rare products. The game was auctioned off by a professional hunter who was playing as a player, Jets Harry, who had signed an agreement with the auction, with the intention of pinning his dreams about the game to his descendants. In Ron's opinion, this Jets Harry may also have some unknown connection with Kim, otherwise it would not have been so coincidental that Jay discovered the existence of the Island of Greed in early August, and then the Island of Greed was auctioned in September. To say that there is no gold design and arrangement in the middle, Ron is not convinced to kill it. The starting price of the Greedy Island is 8.9 billion, which is more conscientious than the list price of 5.8 billion yen when it was sold. However, Ron can feel that there are many rich people around him who are very interested in the game of the Island of Greed, and coupled with the inevitable success of Batra, this game will at least soar tens of billions. In 1987, Maryland Games Co., Limited released Greedy Island, a total of 100 units, priced at 5.8 billion denunciations, and was snapped up at the moment of listing. 5.8 billion denunciations, 100 units. That's 580 billion abstinence. You know, at this auction, the professional hunter named Jets Harry only took out 7 sets to sell. These 7 Greedy Islands were all auctioned by Batra for 30.5 billion, 27.8 billion, and 60.2 billion, respectively. According to the average price of 39.5 billion a unit, then these 7 games, Batra spent a total of 276.5 billion rings. If you put together, it is 300 billion rings. 300 billion abstinence has already cost Batra, the world's richest man, almost half of the assets, that is, his total assets are about 600 billion abstinence. Kim casually made an Island of Greed game that trained for his son, and only sold 100 units, which was about the same amount as the assets that Batla owned. It can be seen that the funds and power held by Kim are absolutely beyond everyone's imagination, and even the president does not necessarily have such energy. And that's just the tip of the iceberg for his gaming industry. Maybe he has any other games, as well as the achievements and benefits of the industry in other areas such as creatures, relics, etc., it is even more uncountable. You must know that King's most famous feat, but the renovation of the ruins of Rurika, has been recorded in the annals of history and entered the textbook. With that said, the ruins that Kim invited me to explore are definitely not low in value. What a relic that can be seen by gold. For a moment, Ron's mind gradually became somewhat alive. Gradually, over time, the B-zone was gradually filled with people, and many collectors were very interested in these strange things. Fei Tan and Finks chased and intercepted Xiaoji and returned to the scene again. At the same time, Xiaoji and Qi Li plus the 3 Xianpai also sat in a seating area very far away from Fei Tan here. Ron was also in a corner and saw his second brother tasting the desserts offered at the auction, as well as Batra, who was sitting with a group of bodyguards. In this way, when the seats were almost seated, the organizer of the auction sent 3 very beautiful and bumpy auction commentators to the central platform. Under the professional smile of the young ladies, the eye waves in the pupils and the faint starlight were revealed, indicating their inner thoughts. Ron looked at the end of the auction list in his hand, then at the ladies, and couldn't help but smile and shake his head. At the end of the book, it is vaguely mentioned and can enjoy special auction services. The service goods auctioned are these commentators. Although it is essentially no different from the so-called one-stop service, it can only be regarded as a graceful and interesting thing for gentlemen and celebrities, just like taking ice crystal radish. And for the group of ladies, all those who sat in the venue were either rich or expensive. To be able to have close or even more contact with these social elites is a matter of reluctance. If you take care of the other party comfortably, it is a matter of fighting for decades less. Even if you look at the right eye, you may ascend to the heavens one step at a time, and have a glory and wealth that you can't enjoy for a lifetime. Therefore, the Nampi's dream auction, the job and profession of the auction lady, even if it is treated as a commodity, there are many very beautiful women who break the scalp to fight. In order to allow celebrities to enjoy the most intimate service, the auction will naturally conduct a very strict review of this group of beautiful women. Therefore, even if Ron has seen beautiful women like Xiaodi and March, as well as Bisca's cute Lolita form, he still feels that the group of ladies standing in the field are very eye-catching. Of course, Ron didn't have any other ideas. Miji and Kim were waiting for his cooperation, and he didn't have much time to waste. Soon, with a beautiful opening remark, the auction in Area B was officially announced.